Hello and welcome to The Toughest Choice. I'm Stephanie Reynolds. I am delighted to have John Mark Hack with us today as our guest. John Mark has a very interesting background. He is currently president and CEO of The Healing Place, which is a nationally renowned organization in Louisville, Kentucky, dedicated to providing comprehensive recovery services to women and men dealing with alcoholism and addiction, as well as serving unhoused people. John Mark joined the Healing Place in March of 2024, coming back to his hometown of Louisville after a career of an extensive career in business, government, academia, and nonprofits. He says his journey to the Healing Place began on July 8th, 2012, his own sobriety date, although, of course, he didn't know it at that time. And I just want to welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us today, John Mark.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's good to be here.
Excellent. So I'm so curious, and I know our audience is as well. Tell us about a little bit more about the Healing Place, what drew you there, and what you're in the process of accomplishing there.
The Healing Place is a 35-year-old nonprofit addiction recovery, alcoholism recovery organization that also, like you said in the intro, provides services to unhoused people. We started 35 years ago providing long-term residential recovery at no cost to client. So anybody who needed to walk through our doors 24 hours a day, 7 days a week could do it regardless of ability to pay. And we continue to provide that service. We operate detox facilities on 2 campuses here in Louisville. Our men's campus is about 2.5 miles from our women's campus, but those detox doors, they're never locked. And whoever needs to walk through those detox doors can, however many times they need to walk through them without limitation. And we provide non-medical detox services in hopes that we can work with our clients and get them into longer term recovery. We do serve a large indigent population, but we also have a very diverse clientele, and it makes for an amazing community of recovery. We are what we call a peer-driven social model of recovery, and abstinence is our goal. And so just to unpack peer-driven social model a little bit, we do have professional clinicians on staff, licensed clinicians, but they don't drive the recovery experience of our clients. The people who drive the recovery experience of our clients are those who hold positions that we call peer mentors. And those are clients who have completed their own recovery program and decided to commit another 3 to 6 months at the Healing Place in exchange for a relatively small stipend and room and board to shepherd or serve as a pathfinder for the men and women coming behind them. They're the people on the front lines, along with our detox monitors, who do the most important work of our organization and walking alongside of our clients through their recovery journey. We're a 12-step based program, and so those peer mentors play a really important role in supporting our clients through that 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous process. And when we say social model of recovery, it means that our recovery experience takes place within a therapeutic community. And it's a community that sets and enforces their own standards of accountability. And we have over 8,500 alumni over the past 35 years of our existence. One of the beautiful things about leading this organization is we have 130 staff members. We serve between 600 and 700 clients a day. And we have 130 staff members. 80% of them are alumni of the Healing Place recovery programs. 90% of us are in recovery ourselves. And what that creates is a really remarkable environment of truly unconditional love and compassion and support and accountability. This is the only place I've ever worked where we openly tell each other we love each other on a daily basis. And it's okay. HR doesn't mind. And in fact, it's encouraged. The other thing that that creates is this wonderful leadership opportunity to meet many of our employees where they are in their first professional engagements and to walk alongside of them and invest in their personal development so that they can reach their full potential. So in a nutshell, that's who we are and what we do. It's a fantastic organization that's been replicated in several other communities across Kentucky and in several communities, particularly in the Southeast United States. We attract clients from all across the US and, in fact, many international clients. So we have, after 35 years, established a pretty solid brand and recognition that what we have to offer works. And it's a rewarding environment every day that we're here.
We've had a chance to meet and talk before, and I've been learning about the Healing Place. I'm learning more again in speaking with you, and I'm so touched by the potential of peer community and the power of the peer community. And, it's like intellectually, we know, many of us know that being in an environment where people have been there, done that, and have walked difficult pathways, similar pathways, the willingness for those that are being supported to receive that information and potentially believe it,
Hmm.
and then be open to the support and the approach goes up exponentially.
It does. There are professional clinicians who do amazing work every day in the recovery space. And I think they will tell you that they invest a significant amount of time in establishing trust and relatability with their clientele. With the peer mentor, the peer driven model, the runway for establishing that trust is much shorter. And the relatability can oftentimes be instantaneous because somebody can recount a story from their recent past and more often than not find an immediate connection with somebody in the room who had a very similar experience. And a lot of us who struggle with drug and alcohol addiction also struggle with the notion that we're unique from everybody else, that nobody can really relate to our experience and how difficult we've had it. And that assumption is immediately shattered when people come into the healing place because they're surrounded by people who, we can relate to being arrested for this and that. We can relate to having difficult times with family members. We can relate to losing everything we have, and there are just so many points of commonality in the experience that creates a level of trust among our clients and our peers that kind of leads to the magic of what happens here.
It sounds very comprehensive. 'Cause I also noticed when you mentioned that those peers that are shepherding the newer folks coming into recovery also need support and development. I'd love your opinion, but I think well beyond those that might identify themselves as addicted. And it's a human condition issue that, the loneliness that pervades organizational environments and beyond today is pretty rampant. And, the kind of closeted behaviors that we all have to cope, even if it doesn't necessarily result in, we may still be able to function and appear to be highly functional. I just think that this model of healing from a community and been there, done that standpoint really has potential for well beyond, I think, the community that might identify themselves as addicted.
That's really good insight because addiction, drug addiction, alcoholism, gambling addiction, screen time addiction, sex addiction, whatever the addiction is, more often than not, it's at least partially the result of an absence or deficiency of connection. And like you point out, we live in a society that stresses individualism and independence to a fault in many ways. And so we seek that connection in the bottle, or we seek that connection in the 8 ball of cocaine, or we seek that connection in methamphetamine or fentanyl or opioids, in gambling, in sex, in screen time. And we struggle because whatever fulfills our need in that moment gives us just enough relief to convince us that we can consistently find it every time we need it. And it becomes easier to find connection in the bottle than it does to find connection in our loved ones or our friends or our community, because we're dragging along all of this baggage that we've created as a result of our decision making and as a result of our oftentimes unfortunate behavior. We've got this baggage and we think that it automatically disqualifies us
Mm.
from being in connection with people that are closest to us or being in connection with anybody for that matter. And what the peer driven social model does is it creates a community of connection. And whether you want to be connected or not, you are. And the brotherhood and the sisterhood that takes place within this therapeutic community, it's embracing of literally everyone who comes through the door. And the healing place is the most diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment that I've ever been in. The camaraderie, the mutual support, the mutual accountability, it's restorative. It's restorative of that sense of dignity and worthiness
Mhm.
that all of us are both capable and worthy of having deep, meaningful relationships with one another. And it doesn't matter what's transpired in our past or what we're recovering from. I like to remind people that I'm recovering from alcoholism and addiction to cocaine. There are people here recovering from opioid addiction, people here recovering from methamphetamine addiction, from benzo, from Xanax addiction, from Adderall addiction. But I maintain that every single one of us is recovering from something.
Mhm.
We're recovering from heartache. We're recovering from job loss. We're recovering from grief, loss of a loved one, loss of a relationship. We're recovering from financial disaster. We're recovering from illness. And the trajectory of that recovery is common to all of us. What we're conditioned to think is that the alcoholic and the drug addict is somehow separated into an other category, right?
Category, yes.
But the fact of the matter is, we're all recovering from something, and that recovery involves the restoration of connections that we've lost along the way because of whatever circumstances we've encountered on our individual life journeys.
Oh, that's so beautifully said, and, just echoing back, I my experience in talking with hundreds of leaders over the years, the issues of hiding, of shame, of imposter syndrome, of only showing a certain aspect of self to the world and not feeling whole, not allowing themselves to feel whole and stand in their truth. That doesn't come from doing it by yourself, and a coach is not enough. It has to be the true to my experience is so much more limited, but at the same time, it's the interaction with the team, with the others in the environment that allows them to actually be themselves more fully. The environments that do that,
Hmm.
the environments that don't shut that down and push forward in the name of profitability or whatever it is,
Yeah.
are the environments where people not only heal, but they flourish. They actually come into more capability and
Yep.
productivity. in ways that are renewed and energized. But we can't do it alone. That's what you're saying.
No, we can't do it alone. And an important part of coming back into relationship with others is being willing to accept the accountability that those relationships necessarily present to us.
Mm.
And a particular strength of the peer driven model is one addict can't fool another addict. You know, we are virtually professional manipulators by virtue of our past decision making and our past behaviors. We can't manipulate other master manipulators. And so peers are willing to call us on our BS when they see it. But the way they do it is not in a condescending, I'm above you way, right? The way we do it is, hey, I had a similar experience, but let me tell you what went wrong for me. And let me tell you about the strength that I derived from that experience and the hope that I have for the future.
Ah, wow. Well, that really channels it and it meets the person where they are, doesn't put them down, but at the same time reflects back a personal experience that helps the other really take in the possibilities and have the room to shift how they're needing to show up or holding it. So that's powerful.
It is powerful. And for so many of our clients, Stephanie, they're coming from life experience where that accountability has not been a daily part of their experience. And others are coming from family backgrounds that have essentially enabled their decision making and their behavior. We have something that we like to remind ourselves of here, and that is that our families, can sometimes literally love us to death. And what we're about here is loving us to life. Just this week, for example, somebody who I've known for 27 years came into our detox facility. I know his family, and he's struggled with alcoholism and addiction for quite some time. He's been in and out of recovery programs. We're kind of the last stop on the block for him. And his family had cut off communication with him for a little while, and he got here and went through detox, and he cleared his head, and he begins to sound like himself again. He begins to be articulate and can share coherent thoughts. And he talked to his brother, and his brother said, man, he sounded really great. I think it's okay for us to restore communication with him. And I said, this is not professional clinical advice, but I really strongly urge you not to, and to consider not being in communication with him for at least 150 days. And as hard as that sounds, 150 days in the context of our entire lives is not very long. But what we do in early recovery, without even consciously knowing that we're doing it sometimes, is we convince ourselves that we're further along than we are. We convince the people around us that we're further along than we are. And even the least amount of connection restoration with people that we love the most can take us into a state of mind where we think we're much further along in our recovery than we are. And it disconnects us from the willingness to do the work necessary to change our behavior and to change our thinking. We've alienated the connections that are most important to us in our alcoholism and our drug addiction, oftentimes to the point of homelessness. And what we're doing at the Healing Place is taking people through a peer-driven social model with a structured environment. It includes a lot of accountability. It includes daily work assignments. So our clients provide all of our food service. They provide all of our housekeeping services, all of our security services, janitorial services, maintenance. They do that under the supervision of paid staff, but they all have work obligations because they're here at no cost to them. And what that work does is restore a sense of self-worth and a sense of dignity, but a sense of connection to the whole, and a sense of obligation to the whole. And it creates a mindset of becoming a community citizen. And many of us have never had that mindset. We've not been invited into community citizenship. For the first time in a lot of people's lives here at the Healing Place, they are. And once they get there, more often than not, they don't want to leave it. They don't want to leave that sense of connection.
Well, and contribution and dignity, like you said, it's the connection and the meaning. Like I'm here, not only am I loved and held without judgment and helped, but I'm helping. And so I become part of the cloth. Wow, there's so much there. I would like we can spend 2 more hours talking about the ramifications at a societal level and an organizational level. I do want to ask a few more questions about you and your leadership. Before I pivot to that, though, I understand that your vision of where your organization might go goes beyond this environment that currently exists. Can you speak to that just a little bit? Because I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. So our mission in a nutshell is to equip people with the tools they need to restore meaningful and productive lives. And we've gotten as good as any organization in the world at the restoration of meaningful lives. What we're working on now is turning our attention toward the restoration of productive lives. And we're doing that through the addition of a new program we're calling the Brady Center for Productive Living. And that's named for a physician who has been an instrumental leader in the recovery arena for decades. He passed away last year. His name was Dr. Burns Brady, and he was one of the co-founders of the Healing Place. And what we're doing is we're creating a new program that dovetails with our recovery experiences in a way that once people reach a certain stage of progress in their personal recovery, they can begin to think about with clarity about where they want to go in their lives, what they want to be, who they want to be when they leave the Healing Place. And what we intend to do is to meet them where they are and provide individual coaching assistance in 3 areas. The first is in the area of clearing the slate of all of the obstacles that we may have created for ourselves. About 55% of our employees have justice involvement in their past. About the same percentage, 65% of our clients are referred to us from State Department of Corrections, local Department of Corrections. They have justice involvement in their past. So record expungement is an obstacle for many of us. There's oftentimes financial restitution associated with justice involvement. Sometimes it causes us to even lose our custody of our kids. So there are family reunification issues. And all of that can be really insurmountable to somebody who's fresh in recovery, right? So we want to meet them there and we want to identify what those obstacles are. And we have the relationships with legal aid. We have the relationships with the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, our local prosecutor's office. We have relationships with the Department of Corrections and Child Protective Services. We want to facilitate the elimination of those obstacles so that then we can look at the second level of service, and that is taking people through a structured curriculum of identifying who they were meant to be, who were they created to be. A lot of us, when we get to recovery, we're so grateful for sobriety and for being clean that we're willing to settle for whatever's offered to us because we've lost such a sense of worthiness, right, along the way by virtue of our own behavior and decision making. And we want to shatter the myth that you have to settle. And I don't mean anything negative about this comment that I'm about to make, but you don't have to settle for low level employment. You don't have to be an entry level employee for the rest of your life unless you want to, which is perfectly fine too. But if you aspire to something else, if you feel your heart being pulled in another direction and you feel like it's not attainable, let's find out what that is. And then let's pair you up with the resources that you need to get on track to achieving that. And then finally, that third level of service in the Brady Center for Productive Living is aimed at the tactics of fully realizing our highest dreams and aspirations. So things like resume preparation and cover letter writing and job interview practice and job possibility identification and financial literacy, basic living skills and life skills, because a shocking number of us come from life experiences that don't include those things in our upbringing. Some of us have the benefit of knowing what path we should take, right? And we're exposed to all of the tools and the skill sets that we need to go down those paths. But a remarkable number of people in this country are not exposed to that. And it's not through any fault of their own. Another thing that I like to remind people of is that we're bound fundamentally by two facts. None of us choose our parents, and none of us choose the zip code into which we are born. None of us do. And so I was born into a zip code of advantages with a loving, caring, supportive mother. But a lot of people aren't. And a lot of people's parents weren't. And a lot of people's grandparents weren't. And I believe fundamentally we have a shared responsibility to acknowledge that together. Because once we do, we get over the thinking that there's an other. There's a group of people that I'm somehow separated from that I don't share anything in common with. But when the fact of the matter is, I do share a couple of fundamental facts in common with them. They didn't choose their parents and I didn't choose mine. They didn't choose where they were born and I didn't choose where I was born. And that creates an opportunity for engagement. If people really embrace that, it creates an opportunity for engagement that can bridge all kinds of social fault lines if we're willing to think about that. So we want the Brady Center for Productive Living to be a place where people clear the obstacles that they don't feel overwhelmed by getting their record expunged, by getting their families restored, by getting their kids back, by creating a budget that allows them to meet back child support obligations or allows them to meet their financial restitution responsibilities, all while putting them on a pathway to identify their highest dreams, their highest aspirations, and then giving them the tactical resources to be able to head that direction. And so the continuum of care then becomes you can come into detox 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, no questions asked. Follow your recovery journey. And then toward the end of your recovery journey, we start contemplating together what's next for you. And then we create an alumni base that's supportive of the people coming behind them.
Thank you for sharing so much. I'd love to learn about you just personally a little bit more in your leadership orientation and philosophy. So, in the first place, what drove you to leadership? What was it that made you feel like you wanted to be a leader?
My family experienced a pretty severe trauma very early in my life. When I was 4 years old, my father was killed in a car crash. When he was killed, he had a sixth grade education. And my mother was 37 at the time, and she had not finished high school yet. My brother was 13, my sister was 10, I was 4. And what I witnessed in the person that I was fortunate enough to be born to was a commitment and sense of resilience that I haven't seen again in my life experience so far. I've seen, similarities, but what she did was really remarkable. My mother, she committed herself to completing her high school diploma, not her GED, but her high school diploma at 37, going back to night school. When I was in eighth grade, she started at a community college and completed her associate's degree in 2 years. And then when I was in 10th grade, she started 2 years at the University of Louisville. And at the end of my junior year, she graduated from the University of Louisville at age 50 with a degree in guidance and counseling, and then went to work as an academic counselor in the electrical engineering department of the engineering school at the University of Louisville. While she was doing that, she was committed to a life of service to other people. And what I saw in her was not somebody, what I was exposed to every day was not somebody who led from a title or led from a particular physical position or a particular professional position, but somebody who led from her heart in service to others. And I think for me, that set the tone of what real leadership looks like. And it looks like recognizing that I don't construct a sense of humility. Humility comes to me as a result of my meeting people where they are, opening myself to them and committing myself to be of service to them. She passed away in January of 2021. I just happened this morning, just happened to get this letter from a lifelong friend of my mother's who just took the time. She's 92 years old, and she took the time to write me about how excited my mother would be to know that I'm in the position that I'm in.
Oh, what a gift.
Oh, yeah. And so that was the first model of leadership that I was exposed to. And then I had the good fortune of working later in life in the Kentucky governor's office for a truly extraordinary leader who taught me what loyalty meant, and both loyalty to my supervisors and loyalty to my subordinates. The model that he created, his name is Paul Patton. The model that he created and implemented was one of trust and empowerment and loyalty. So he didn't micromanage us, but he had very high expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a strong sense of accountability, and he wasn't shy about enforcing it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was, after all, a governor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the skill sets that I acquired under his leadership were important complements to that foundation that I was fortunate enough to be exposed to in my mother. And so I'm really grateful that my career has been defined, for the most part, by service positions that I've been fortunate and privileged enough to be in, to use the skills and talents that I've been gifted to meet people where they are in particular context and do what I can to be of service to them. And I think that's all leadership is.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And your examples are compelling. And so often I think we get confused, leaders get confused about what their jobs really are. And they get coerced by the water that they're swimming in, which is, faster, higher, better, no matter what the cost. And then we lose our own sense of self and our connection to others, but also often results are short term. They're not long term. And the engagement of people around you are based on fear and temporary rather than that loyalty and accountability that keeps coming up in what you're sharing. That's really powerful. Well, how would you characterize a successful and an unsuccessful moment for yourself as a leader, if you can recall those?
Yeah, that's well, the successful moments are like the antithesis of the unsuccessful
Yeah,
moments.
right.
That's that's relatively easy to do. The successful moments are times when I am demonstrating to the team that I'm privileged to lead a commitment to continuous learning
Mm,
and a commitment to acknowledging when I'm wrong and being vulnerable enough to share that with people in the right context and the right times. I'm not talking about making myself a martyr in front of the whole organization, but in individual situations with individual direct reports, I think it's really important for our teams to see that we acknowledge our own humanity and our own shortcomings. Adam Grant has a book that I'm finishing up right now called Think Again.
mm,
And he's got this beautiful line in there that's just sticking with me because I'm wrong so many more times than I'm right. I tend to live my life by the rules of baseball, Stephanie. So
Sure.
if I'm right 1 out of 3 times, then I feel like I'm headed to the Hall of Fame. So,
That's
but
a great batting average, John Mark.
yeah, right, yeah. If I'm a 300 hitter lifetime, I am in. But Adam Grant has this line where he says, "There's joy in acknowledging when we're wrong, and the joy is we're less wrong than before."
Mm, mm,
And if I can acknowledge to my team
mm,
the times that I'm wrong, then I'm less wrong than I was before, and they can see that they can be less wrong too, and they don't have to hold themselves to unrealistic standards and expectations that are setting them up for failure. We're in this together. We've got shared values, a shared sense of purpose. Let's hold each other accountable. We have to perform at a high level because the mission that we have is literally a life or death mission. So we don't allow each other to perform at a level less than what we should, but at the same time we extend grace and understanding that includes the idea that we don't reject the really good in pursuit of the perfect, right?
mhm, mhm,
And so when I'm leading well, I'm modeling for people who find themselves in difficult or challenging situations. And I'm supporting them and coaching them through those difficult and challenging situations in ways that clearly communicate standards of accountability, but also encourage. That's a really key word.
mm,
Encourage people not to catastrophize,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
To help people put things in the proper frame of reference
mm,
and to support them in that frame of reference because in our world of alcoholics and addicts, we have a tendency, like many other non-alcoholics and addicts, we have a tendency to make mountains out of molehills and just to make things much worse than they really are. And what that ends up doing is making a bad situation worse. But if I can team up with my direct reports in a way that heads that off, heads off that catastrophizing and keeping things in a proper frame of reference, I'm leading well. When I'm not leading well,
yes.
I'm taking things personally that I shouldn't take personally.
Mm,
I'm taking the decisions of personnel to leave the organization as somehow direct critique of my own leadership.
mm,
And I can speak to this from experience, right?
mhm,
I'm allowing myself to make mountains out of molehills. I'm allowing my own behavior to make bad situations worse. And unfortunately, there are days that I still do that. I think it's really important to acknowledge what Adam Grant says. There's joy in realizing when we're wrong because we're less wrong than we were before. And that's, in my mind, what continuous progress, continuous improvement, and growth means, both on an individual level and on a team level.
mm. And it sounds like you're walking that
Thank you.
philosophy. Yeah, that's the power. The power is you're walking it. And I too, just had a very similar experience. And at first, I took it personally and thought the feedback I was getting from a colleague was off because it didn't feel good. And as a result, I came back to her. I was on a much more senior level and said, you know what? I thought about it, and you're right. I was rationalizing. I was somehow making something okay that isn't. And the impact on me was it led to many other it took me in a different direction entirely. The impact on her was so heartening because she said, nobody ever says that. When you call a leader on something, it's so rare. And that needs to be common common practice rather than unusual. And so your sharing of that success and unsuccessful kind of approach is so poignant. Thank you. Thank you, John
Yeah,
Mark.
thank you.
It's powerful. And so for yourself, it's clear you've had some tough choices in your career. Can you share, one where you had to summon your courage and do the right thing in the face of tough odds? Can you share one of those with us?
Yeah, I could share a number of them. Most recently, the most difficult thing that I've had to do since I've been here was really dig in and look under the hood of this 35-year-old nonprofit organization. There was some financial reckoning that we had to undertake. On October 1st last year, I had to do a reduction in force, and we eliminated 18 full-time positions and 10 part-time positions. And I decided to do every one of those personally and do them in the same day, because all 18 of those people, all 18 of the people whose positions were eliminated, it just so happened all 18 of them were alumni of this organization's recovery programs. And it was important to me to convey to them that it wasn't a question of their performance. It was a question strictly of the financial health and well-being of the organization. That was difficult because of who we are, what we do, and who we serve. And I will tell you that I underestimated, in my own sort of machismo leadership that I can fall into if I'm not mindful. I underestimated the impact of that experience on me. And it took me to a place of falling out of balance in my spiritual, mental, physical well-being because I underestimated that. And one thing I would say to people who are in leadership positions is that if we're going to serve our teams to the best of our ability, we have to acknowledge our own points of vulnerability and recognize when we need help. And we can't assume that we're tough enough and strong enough and good enough to navigate our way through really challenging and difficult situations and believe they don't affect us. That was a tough choice, but I'll tell you, of those 18 people, and I'm not exaggerating this at all, 15 of them sat across the table from me and said something like, not all of them said the same thing, obviously, but they said something like, I believe in what you're doing. You're doing really important work. You're doing the right thing. You keep it up.
Wow.
As they were losing their jobs.
Wow.
This place needs to stay open, they said. Now, the other three, they didn't react that way, but I thought 15 out of 18 was pretty
That's
solid.
amazing. Those are amazing numbers. Yeah.
And the other three were just reacting out of pain and fear, and their reactions were perfectly appropriate too. But I took away from that experience, I was making the right decision. We had to reduce our expenses. We had to bring our expenses in line with our revenue. We were so out of balance. We had to introduce new standards of efficiency and how we're meeting our clients' needs. But that was tough. And it was, I'm going to say it was probably more tough in this environment than it would have been in the construction and engineering firm that I was leading before I came here.
The fact that you did that yourself is just huge in terms of the impact on the others, as evidenced by 15 out of 18 saying, you're doing great work here. The interesting thing is, ironically, I was watching Up in the Air last night,
Oh,
the
yeah.
film about, outsourcing, letting people go to an outside firm.
Yeah.
And the poignancy of what you're sharing about the impact on the person who does it, not just the people receiving it, and how powerful that is. So I'm hearing we need support. It throws us out of balance. And we too need support as leaders. And the last question I want to ask you, and thank you so much for this conversation.
No, it's my pleasure.
So it's so chock full of lessons and inspiration. Is what do you think leaders need today, John Mark, in our current, what we're currently experiencing in the world and also just in the environments of organizations?
Leaders need the courage that comes from encouragement from each other to recognize that the highest profile models of leadership that seem to imply the best leadership traits probably aren't. The courage that comes from encouragement to recognize that our highest calling as leaders is to create the conditions that allow other people to thrive. And our creation and sustaining of those conditions is contingent upon our ability and willingness to recognize our own limitations and to ask for help when we need it. If we can do that, then I think we can be transformative in our individual roles. And we can model for the people that we lead the exact behavior that we want to see in them.
Well, amen to that. I feel moved by this conversation, truly, and inspired by not only what you're doing, but the thoughtfulness and personal experience and intention of your own lifelong learning journey that you're pouring into it. It's chock full of insight and experience that I think will be really, really helpful. Thank you so much.
I'm really honored that you wanted to chat, and I appreciate the opportunity very much.
Thank you for listening. To hear more conversations with leaders, please subscribe to The Toughest Choice wherever you listen to podcasts. For updates, please connect with me on LinkedIn. This is Stephanie Reynolds. Thanks for listening.